Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I am your host, John Strazicich. Okay, so we are continuing on here in our exegetical study in the prophecy, poetry, and politics of the prophet Amos. And according to the superscription of our book, the title of the book of Amos is Divrei Amos, the words of Amos. Okay, then once again, we're coming here then to the Aleppo Codex, and we begin here in chapter 6, verse 1 with Hoi. So it says, Hoi hasha'ananim bitzion, v'habot hechim v'har shomron, nikuvei reshit hagoyim, uva'u lahem beit Yisrael. Ivru kalne ure'u, ulechu misham chamat rabba, uredu got pilishtim, hatovi mim hamamlachot ha'ele, imrav gevulam migevulechem. And then we have this accusatory question in 6:3 here. And note Ben Asher's spelling. It's with a chatef patak, this PL participle. Hama nadim leyom ra. Vata gishun. And then we got to go over to the next colophon and pick up shevet chamas. Okay, then coming here, we'll offer up our translation. Woe to those who are at ease in Zion, and those who trust in Mount Samaria, designated firsts of the nations. To them the house of Israel comes. Pass over to Kalne and see, and go from there to Hamat Rabbah, and go down to Gath of the Philistines. And then he has a couple of rhetorical questions here. Are you better than these kingdoms? Or is their border greater than your border? And then in verse 3, he has his accusatory question. Are you pushing off, or you could even say, are you canceling the day, the evil day? And you cause to bring near the seat of violence, the Shevet Hamas. So you could say for Shevet, you can say, throne. You are bringing near the throne of violence, and then you can take that thought a little bit further and smooth out the translation, and you bring near the rule of violence, and that really brings across what's really going on. So he ends here in this accusatory question here. Are you putting off the evil day? So we're going to say that's going to definitely refer to the Yom Yahweh, the day of Yahweh, and you bring near the rule of violence. That's our translation. Okay, then what we're going to do here is take probably a little more of a deeper dive here into structural analysis and explaining its importance. So when we come here today, we're looking at chapter 6, verses 1 to 14, and this is point B, Amos's second woe oracle, the false complacency of Israel's leadership and their apathy to Joseph's ruin. That pretty much sums up this particular chapter. Now, so we're working in macro units because what came before this was Amos's first oracle, and we saw that in 5:18 to 27 in our last study. So this is why it's point B here. So it's Amos's second. So after and when you come to chapter 7, it's the book of visions. And so this pretty much ends the middle section from chapters 3 to 6. It ends with these two oracles. And so looking at the macro structure, then we have to decide, okay, well, can we break down 1 to 14? And so, most scholars, this is an easy call. Point 1 here is Amos's 7 woe oracles to the leadership of Israel and the announcement of exile, verses 1 to 7. Okay. And to justify that 7 is the cutoff point, we will move on to the next slide. Okay, then when we come to this slide, looking at the second point, Yahweh's divine oath to exile Israel over their pride and the boast of their military might and injustice. This covers 8 to 14. And all you need to do is just look at verse 8. The Lord Yahweh has sworn by his own soul, declares the Lord God of hosts. I loathe the pride of Jacob, and his fortresses I hate. So this mirrors all, actually the Yahweh Reda from last time when that other part of the first day of the Lord unit, that woe oracle there, it also broke down in the last part into a Yahweh speech. This one here is more of a, Amos is quoting some different thoughts of Yahweh, but definitely his oath here. And it's very important that we, when you go to look at this, you have to be in agreement that 8 to 14 is a separate unit. The text is to be divided. From 1-7 is one unit, and then 8 to 14 is going to form another unit. Because if you don't, you're just going to you're going to blur the text, and so Amos here just wants to point out that this is Yahweh's oath. And so this means that he's taking it much more seriously, because Yahweh is swearing by his own soul. Literally, it says, "Nishba Adonai Yehovah benafsho." The Lord Yehovah has sworn benafsho, by his own soul. That's the literal translation here. So that should cue you off that okay, and then this is going to be, this is why I put it down here, Yahweh's oath. It's a divine oath. Okay, then having established that, basically there are two units here in chapter 6, verses 1 to 14. We'll come back here to point 1 here, Amos's 7 woe oracles to the leadership of Israel and the announcement of judgment, 1 to 7. So what I've done here, notice here I put 7 woe oracles. So if you, when you come to the text and you start counting the noun / adjective participial phrase that starts off like, woe to those who are at ease in Zion, and those who trust in Mount Samaria, and those who lay down and who are sprawled out, and who eat and pluck and drink. Most of these are all participles, which would line up all with the woe. It would be repeating, and this is noted by several scholars. Now they may not count out 7, but I have here in this particular in my analysis. Now I differ from Anderson and Friedman in the Anchor Bible, just simply because I'm following the Masoretic text, especially here. Since we're looking, we're reading out of the Aleppo Codex, we're just looking at the way Ben Asher pointed the text, and the way he pointed the text, that the first two woes are here in verse 1, and then the 5 following ones would be found down here in 4 to 6. The one in verse 3 that the Anderson and Friedman would be looking for is not pointed as a the hay that is attached to the participle is an interrogative, meaning it the hay is something that looks, it's a question, and because it does not come with the dagesh, this is stuff that you have to know Hebrew to be able to understand that. But anyhow, so I'm the long and short of it is that I'm just following the Masoretic text as it is, and so as the text comes to us, it lays out which ones should be identified as belonging, and I would say to the oracle. So that's what I've done, and so now what we're going to do. That's justifying. I say all this to justify the title here. Amos's 7 woe oracles to the leadership of Israel and the announcement of exile. Okay, and that this justifies the entire unit here as a title and covers the basis. And now when we look at 1 to 7, we're going to look to see if there's any way that we can break this down further than just verses 1 to 7. So when you look at verse 1, it begins Hoy, Hasha Nanim, woe to those who are at ease, Bitzion in Zion, right? And those who trust in Mount Samaria. So those are the beginning woe oracles to these individuals, and then additionally they are described as they are designated chiefs of the nation, and they are also then further colored as those to whom the citizenry of Israel come, and so that basically will take up verse 1. But as soon as you come to verse 2, now Amos is calling for 3 observational visits, and then I put and rhetorical questions, which are meant to be a reflection on their complacency. Now this is very important. So you come to verse 2 and you see him all of a sudden he's calling for them to go to Kalne and then to Hamath Rabbah and then down to Gath. All right, and we can see that here in the first part of verse 2, and then in the second part of verse 2 there's some self-reflective rhetorical questions for the leadership about their complacency and national strength. Now that's very important. So what you're doing is you're trying to, you understand here we got a threefold summons to make an international observational visit or trip, right? It says pass over to Kalne and see, or we should say observe. And so that's the reflective moment right there. And then when you come to the second part of verse 2, he's asking, are you better than these kingdoms? Or is their territory greater than your territory? And the answer to both of these questions is no. And then there comes an accusatory question. Are you banishing or are you canceling the evil day? And are you bringing near the reign of violence? And so this is an accusatory question. that when you look at this, it's meant to prick their conscience. Because remember, these are people who are at ease in Zion and are trusting in Mount Samaria. And then these three observational visits, what their intention is to do, is that these are all has-been city states. Kalne was, had its heyday in the past, and now it's just a small city state. And the same with Hamat Rabbah and with Gath. I mean, Gath was actually conquered by Israel, but there was still some autonomy. But Israel was was the suzerain, or it had hegemonic rule over this particular city of Gath. And the questions here: are you better than these kingdoms? And the rhetorical question is to say no. They're no more morally better than these nations. They're just as evil as the rest of them. This is the reason why they're being exiled. And is their territory greater than yours? Well, not now. No. So what they were supposed to observe here was that, wow, at one time these three city-states ruled over a greater territory, but now they have, their rule and hegemony and their prosperity has greatly diminished, so that Israel is better off than they are. But the point here is that, hey, wait a second. These were once great city-states that were bigger and better than us, and now they have been reduced. So this is something that Amos is wanting them to reflect on. Why are you at ease, and why are you trusting in Mount Samaria? So here it's to be a self-reflection, upon their complacency, in which he knows that it's not going to work. So this is why he has this, accusatory question. Are you canceling the evil day? So what this basically means is that they are not allowing anybody to talk about, the times are really bad, and no, they don't want anybody saying anything about that anything is wrong. Everything's going great. Why? Because they're having a great time. The leadership they love the way they rule. I mean, remember, this is a rule of violence, a reign of violence. They have oppressed the poor. They've thrown, righteousness and justice to the ground. And so they have this hegemonic rule over the citizenry, and they love it. So they don't want anything to change. They're partying. When you get to verses 4 to 6, I mean, they're laid out on couches and in ivory beds, and they're drinking, they're singing songs, making music, and it's a party. In fact it's a Marzaic party. And Amos is here to tell them that the party is over. That's basically what's going on here. But I say all that we need to, when we look at at verse 1, we can say, oh, there's woe, so this is this woe oracle formula. And then we have two initial characterizations, those at ease and those who trust. And then there are some additional descriptions of Israel's leadership. They're designated the first of the nation, and they are those to whom the citizenry of the country come. And then there's this call for three, observational visits. So this justifies point 2. So what you have to do then is go back here to verse 1 and then itemize, all the different things that you see that are going on here in verse 1. And then you itemize them, okay? And that's what I have done, okay? Now when you come to verse 2, now we need to see for how long this particular call for observational visits goes for? Well, we can see that, this just goes from, to the basically the first, to the first part of verse 2. And then immediately after the summons for this threefold visit is this self-reflective rhetorical questions for the leadership. And it's concerning their complacency and national strength. Are you better than these kingdoms? Or, is their territory greater than yours? Okay. So these are meant to be self-reflective. So, but it's all remember, this is underneath the canopy of the threefold summons to make international observational visits, and so this is important. And then since that we have this last accusatory question, it just kind of helps sum up here and bring to a conclusion here that what they're actually doing, by being at ease in Zion and trusting in Mount Samaria, is that they are bringing, are you banishing the evil day, thrusting it out? That means not allowing anybody or anyone to talk about anything bad. Everything's great. Don't try to say that our leadership is wrong. Don't let anyone talk. So it's controlling the narrative. That's what I want to say. There's a lot of people who want to control the narrative. Just turn on the TV. Okay, so mainstream media is trying to, give you a certain slant on the news. Everyone's trying to control it. Now remember, how we control everything. We filter everything through the Bible. We we take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. That's how we strain everything that comes to us, and we try to bring it through the grid of the Bible, and we analyze, our own times, and try to make an assessment of what's the reality of what's going on. And this is basically, this is what Amos is calling them to do. Now, the text definitely, when we come to verses 4 to 6, then, this is going to be a separate unit, because now he's returning to the woes and the characterizations of the leadership, their luxurious living. And note here, and apathy to the national ruin. So what this is, that is coming down here to point 6, but they are not grieved over the fracture of Joseph, the ruin of Joseph, okay? That is very important right there. So all of these descriptors here of these additional 5 woes is then all to be, contrasted here by but. They are not grieved over the fracture of Joseph. That's the key. It's not necessarily wrong to lay down on an ivory bed or sprawled out or eat this or that or sing and dance, whatever, or drink wine from a bowl. But it's the context in which it is being done. And if they're doing it at the expense of the fracture of Joseph, and if they're ruling over them with an iron fist so that nobody can move up the ladder, well, that's what this is all about. So it's and this will be explicated in the following unit. Further down here in verse 8. And then point C, then it comes to Lacain. It's therefore. Okay, so it's so this here is, summing up, everything that's, going on, and he announces that the leadership, well, they're the first to go, and it's the eradication of their rave parties, these Marsaic parties, and basically the party's over. So I had titled this the concluding announcement of judgment aimed at the leadership. Exile, and the party is over. Okay, now when we come here, we've pretty much justified our units. Okay, so we've come here then to 6, 1 to 3. Okay, so we have the initial characterization, and woe cries of the leadership of Israel. That's right here. And then we have these additional descriptors here of those who are at ease and who are trusting in Mount Zion. And then verse 2, as we saw, this is the call for international observations to various 3 city-states. And then there are rhetorical questions here. Are you better than these kingdoms, or is their border greater than yours? Okay. Both answers are no. And then 3, this is the accusatory, question. Are you banishing the evil day, thrusting the evil day out? So you cannot talk about any days of woe. No days of woe. These are days. This is the party, that we're enjoying. This is all the party, okay, and we are running the show. But they don't know that socially they are, they are throwing righteousness to the ground, because what are they doing? They're bringing near the seat of violence, or the rule and reign of violence, to keep the status quo. That's what's going on here. So what we've got here, when we look at verse 1, we've got a quatrain, okay? And notice we've got a 3, 3. This is, this first dissect, it's a 3-3. And then we have here, this is very normal, a 3-4 here, which are additional, those designated first of the nations, to whom or to them the house of Israel comes. And so these are that further describes those who are at ease in Zion, and those who are trusting in Mount Samaria. And so it comes in a quatrain. So in a quatrain, it's enough information to give you an idea. And then now he's going to then go off into something else. So he gives us here, instead of a quatrain, he gives us a tristic. And this is this call. So pass over to Calne and see. So this means to make an observation. And then go from there to Hamath Rabbah, and then go down to Gath of the Philistines. So, and so with, so by doing so, I mean, they already know it's going, well, why would he want us to go to Calne and then to Hamath Rabbah and then to Gath? I mean, we just got done conquering. Judah tore down the wall of Gath. What's going on here? And so, why should we be doing this? And this is found in Amos's rhetorical questions. Are you better than these kingdoms, or is their border greater than your border? Well, not any longer. It's not. So the answer to both of these questions is a resounding no. And so they're thinking, well, why should I make the trip? I mean, we're doing great. So then he throws them this question here. Are you thrusting out or banishing? Or I like the word. Are you canceling the evil day? And are you bringing near? And you are bringing near the seat of violence. So this question here is supposed to, prod their conscience, if it's possible. And so that's what's going on here. And you can see here, this is nice. This is a 3, 3 here. This is a very nice. It's a very nice poetry. But when we have the Septuagint here, woe to those who despise Zion, and those who put their confidence in Mount Samaria. So, we've got a total twisting of meaning here of Hasha Ananim here. So they probably read this through metathesis as Sane here. So this is what they've done. Hate. Woe to those who hate Zion. So that's probably what's going on here. Other than that, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Septuagint's really, it goes all over the place here. Because look at here, and they've gathered the rulers of the nations, and they themselves have entered in. O house of Israel, all of you pass over and see, pass through from there to Hamath Rabbah, and then go down from there to Gath of the Philistines. Okay, so they have, what they've done here is they've eliminated, cross over to Calneh, pass over to Calneh. That there, they have completely misread the text, or actually for Calneh, they probably read Kul Lana, for all of them, Passover, all of them, meaning all of you, house of Israel. So that's probably, and C, and then they have everything right after that for a little bit, and then go down to Hamath Rabbah, and then go down to Gath of the Philistines, and then they go off here again. They miss some of the questions, and look at verse 3. Those who are coming to the evil day, those are drawing near, and they take hold of false Sabbaths. So for here, instead, in Shevet Hamas, they read Shabbat, I guess Hamas, and instead of for seat, they read Sabbath. So because obviously for them, remember they just had the consonant, so they could have read Sabbath. For this, that's an unusual reading, but obviously their Sabbaths were false anyhow. But it's worth your while to look at the Septuagint, especially in the book of Amos. It's very different than most books. There's something there's a lot more different variant readings in the book of Amos. Glennie has written on this particular subject. But anyhow, so I had this other verse down here, Rak etkem yadati mikol mishpahot ha'adamah. So why I included, this is Amos 3:2. Only you have I known from all of the families of the earth, before this up here, there was a call, Shimu, hear this word which Yahweh has spoken to you, O sons of Israel, concerning all of the family which I brought up from the land of Egypt. So in 6:1, woe to those who are at ease in Zion. So this specifically mentions, the leadership in Judah. But remember, this whole unit, this right here is 3:1. So this word was to be heard by what? By all the families which I brought up from the land of Egypt. So this is going to include Judah. So Judah is included in Amos's prophecies. That's kind of set back, in on the back row, so to speak, because what he's speaking to primarily is to Israel, and that's obvious, as we read through the text. But since it mentions those who are at ease, and those who put their trust in Mount Samaria, these are the people that are called out. We don't put our trust, like in the other Old Testament verses that some trust in chariots and and some in horses, but I believe the psalmist says that we will trust in the name of the Lord our God. These people here are not trusting in God; they are trusting in the accomplishments of their own flesh. That is what is always going, on in every single age. And even more so in ours. People have a sense of moral superiority about who they are, their education, their financial status, and all that kind of stuff. All of that is, may have a point here and there, but if your trust ultimately is not in Yahweh, well, you're having your trust in yourself and in the arm of flesh and security and in Mount Samaria. You're trusting in the security of some other powerful nation. Jeroboam the two. This was remember that at this time, Israel and Judah recaptured the territory that David and Solomon had captured. We'll see this by the end of the chapter here. Down at the bottom of verse 13 and 14, we'll see this. But I wanted to look here at this first verse. There was a lot of information here that that we needed to cover, before we move on. And I did want you to remember, I wanted you to appreciate that by making a structural analysis, this takes meditation. You just can't sit down and just whip this out. You have to be able then to really think about the text, meditate on it, look, where the text is going and where the units are differentiated, and then trying to make some glue between them to say, well, why would it say this, and then why would it say what's we know that meaning is always context driven. So by using that, you got to then go back and say, well, then how are these related? What's the glue that unites them? So verses 1 to 3 just have that nice. It's a unit in and of itself, and it's reinforcing. It's calling to question those who are at ease and those who are trusting in their flesh, and it accuses them of banishing any talk of that there's anything bad going on. Don't talk about anything negative. Everything's great. That's what they're trying to do, and by doing so, they're creating a vacuum, which just reinforces the status quo. And what is that? It's their corrupt leadership over the poor. Okay, so we should have some discussion about where these three cities are mentioned that Amos, tells the leadership of Israel to make an observational trip, and the first of these is Calne, and traditionally, Calne is associated with Genesis 10:10 about one of the cities that that Nimrod had built. In Genesis 10:10 it says, Vatehi Reshit Mamlakto Bavel ve'erek ve'achad ve'kalne ve'eret shinar. And this says basically, and the beginning of his kingdom was in Babylon and in Erech and Akkad and Kalne in the land of Shinar. So that would definitely, put, this in Mesopotamia. Sir Henry Rawlinson has advocated that Nippur should be associated with Kalne. So this would be in lower Mesopotamia here, below Babylon. But modern scholars, what they're doing is they're associating it somewhere up here in northern Syria, due to the fact that Isaiah in chapter 10, verse 9 says is not Kalno as Carchemish. And so most modern scholars are placing this particular Kalne is equivalent with Kalno, and it's somewhere up here. It would be located near Aleppo. Okay. And that's kind of what you're going to find in the literature. And remember that, it says Ivru, Passover, usually, that, you can associate with that passing over the river, the Euphrates. Even it's, what Hebrew means is one who's passed over the river. But it doesn't have to mean, it wouldn't have to mean that. Amos uses, that particular verb, in other ways, not associated specifically with passing over the Euphrates. But that is something to keep in mind. It could be referring something, all the way over here to Nippur, but most scholars are putting it over here to Aleppo. And I just want you to be aware of both interpretations. Okay, then coming then to this slide, we can see up here Hamath on the lower Orontes River here, and this is northern, Syria here, or southern Syria here, and this is something that we need to discuss. This here we have the Lebanon mountains here, the Lebanon mountains here. We have this valley here, and Baalbek is about somewhere right about here. And the Orontes, this is like the peak of the valley. You can see this big valley that runs through here. And so the Orontes River begins here and works its way down, and it comes out up here somewhere. So it flows through and it actually goes into modern day Turkey. But once you come here, you can see that the mountains end and a valley opens up. So this here is, what we would refer to the phrase Lebo Hamath, which means, before Hamath or on the way to Hamath. So what it does is refers to, this would be the northern boundary of Israel, is that, so once you get out of the mountain valley and, the mountains here, and then it opens up into a big plain, well, this is on the way to Hamath. And so Hamath the Great is up here. So this is this city that he's referring to. But when you use the phrase Lebo Hamath, which by the end of the chapter it will do that, which is designated as the border, of Israel, that Jeroboam had some success of reestablishing Israel's territory. So Hamath the Great is up here. So as you leave the valley, it opens up, and it's the road. It's on the way to Hamath. So that is, the Lebo Hamath comes from. It's a geographical terminology that would become obvious to those who traveled this way. So I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, then coming then to Gath here. This this is squarely here in the land of Israel, and we do note that specifically. Remember when we covered chapter 1, Gath was not mentioned, but we Gaza was, Ashkelon was, Ekron was, and Ashdod was. Okay, but Gath wasn't, but it is now. And that was probably because by the time, and we had mentioned this before, that by this time, Uzziah had broken down the wall of Gath, so it didn't need to be mentioned. But still, the Pentapolis of the Philistine cities were still here, but they were in a state of somewhat of a subjugation by Uzziah at this time. So I just wanted you to be aware, and then you can see here this is the valley of Elah here, and this is where the famous battle of David and Goliath occurred. Okay, then coming here then to this slide, the basic fundamental operating principles of biblical Hebrew poetry can be characterized as distinct modes of discourse. So we can look at this in the Bible. There are hymns, love poetry, dirges, blessings, communal laments, prophetic controversies, victory songs, and laments, and so this is definitely combines our text here with Hoy, in 6:1 definitely begins with Hoy, and so it's a dirge and a mixed with a prophetic judgment speech, and so when we say here that Hebrew poetry can be characterized as distinct modes of discourse. So it's either lyric poetry, it could be erotic poetry with the Song of Songs, and then as we mentioned, these communal laments and victory songs and dirges proper and blessings. These are all different types of poetic discourses. Whose prosodic words are communicated. That means that they were preached. Okay, so these they were sung. They were they were dramatically presented. Oracularly. And it's no different for Amos's case. He preached these particular words, and then they were recorded. But let's go a little deeper dive into what prosodic words mean. Okay, so coming here, we're going to look at the work of David Crystal, and he has some very good things that he has to say here about prosody, and you can find this in this volume here on in this book that he worked together here with another scholar, a dictionary of linguistics and phonetics, and so under the topic of prosody, Crystal says the following. In linguistics, prosody is the study of elements of speech, including intonation, stress, rhythm, and loudness that occur simultaneously with individual phonetic segments, vowels, and consonants. Often, prosody specifically refers to such elements known as suprasegmentals. That means, segments of things that are beyond what is written, when they extend across more than one phonetic segment. Prosody reflects the nuanced emotional features of the speaker or their utterances, their obvious underlying emotional state, the form of utterance, statement, question, or command, and we see all these in our unit. The presence of irony, sarcasm, certain emphasis on words or morphemes, contrast, focus, and so on. Prosody displays elements of language that are not encoded by grammar, punctuation, or choice of vocabulary. So here, I just want you to note here that this is the act of utterance is an art, and where one would lift up one's voice and lower it or extend it, it becomes very, very artistic, and we know this, through through music or through plays and the actors that perform them. So this is very important. So prosodic words here, I'm packing in a lot of information with that. So let's go back to our definition. Okay, so then coming back to our definition here, that the fundamental basic operating principles of Hebrew poetry, they are distinct modes of discourse. We've talked about that. Whose prosodic words, okay? So this is, all these things that we talked about here, in the production of performing the utterance of these words. They are communicated and developed by means of discrete units of linearized rhythmical thoughts. So we'll just stop there. So there's going to be a way that Amos had given his utterance, of hoi hasha ananim bitzion, so somehow he, oracularly, pronounced these words in his own voice that was unique to Amos, and so obviously there would have been a big stress here on hoi, whoa. And then he mentions those who are at ease in Zion. So this is what I mean by discrete units of linearized rhythmical thoughts. So there's a rhythm to the pronunciation of hoi hasha ananim bitzion. Okay, and this is it's a thought. So it's a complete thought here. Woe to those who are at ease in Zion. Boom, there's your thought. And it comes just that much at a time, and this is going to then represent the half stitch here of this die stick, and then the second half here, the B part, habotachim behar shomron, is then going to be the next discrete unit of a linearized rhythmical thought. Okay, so thoughts are typically there's in these die sticks, the A and B part of the die stick is going to just have enough element of a thought that's cognitive, that you can grasp it. Okay, A is so, what's more, B is so. So that's what the Hebrew listener was, conditioned to receive. Okay, all right, Amos, woe to those who are at ease in Zion. Okay, that's line A, and then now what's going to be line B? And so the listener of Hebrew poetry would be conditioned to then, okay, what A is so, much more B is so. Now it's those who put their trust in Mount Samaria. So their faith here is in the military might of Samaria. Okay, so A is introductory. They're at ease in Zion. So this just refers to, their laxity of life. That they're happy. They're at ease. They got everything they want. They've got their Lamborghini, and they've got their palace that they live in, and so on and so forth. And then your ease has to have something to do with where your faith is at, where your trust is at, and the trust of people is in the military might of both, the kingdom of Uzziah and Jeroboam II. So I really want you to understand discrete units. So discrete means it's very few choice of words. So you can see here we've got a three construction. We have 3 prosodic words here in line A. We've got 3 here in B. And so these are communicated and developed by means of discrete units of linearized rhythmical thoughts. So the linear refers to line A and then line B. So and that line is then perceived by little chunks of discernible thoughts. Okay, so woe to those who are at ease in Zion. That's a complete thought. Okay, and then you move on and give your next one. Okay, and then that trade in and oscillate between accentual, syntactic, and semantic principles. So here, obviously, we have we have an element here of semantic principles, driving the first distic. Those who are at ease in Zion is then paralleled by those who put their trust in Mount Samaria. So we have the leadership of located in Zion or at ease, and then the leadership of those in Samaria are colored by those who put their trust in Samaria. Okay, so this is a semantic principles on word choices and word pairs, here, as also as well as at ease and those who trust. So these are, these are very, very compatible as synonymous language here. Okay. And then to make, Amos starts off here with this quatrain, and then the second distic doesn't operate according to the principles here of the first line here. Okay, this is going to be more in tuned with accentual. Okay, it just means that there's 3 prosodic words here: boom, boom, and boom. And then we have here, it's 4. Okay, so we have a 3/4 construction here. Nikuve Reshit Hagoyim, designated leaders of the nation, to whom or to them the house of Israel comes. So these are thoughts. Okay, they remember they're always going to be some type of rhythmical thought. Those designated first of the nations. Okay, boom, that's a complete thought. And it has 3 prosodic words, accentualized words. Okay, and then it's likewise here we have the completion of the thought that began here in line A with B. Okay, so they're designated leaders of the nation. So what else do you want us to know? It's to them that the house of Israel comes. To these leaders back here in verse 1 that are at ease and are trusting. Okay, so this is how we are to understand. These are the basic fundamental operating principles of biblical Hebrew poetry. Okay, then coming here, this is important. This is where we kind of put it all together and try to make sense out of the text. So up here we're looking at in terms of, its poetic, nature of our text. And then down here, by means of structural analysis, we're analyzing the meaning of this text, in the fact that we need to then isolate the rhythmical thoughts of the text as they flow, and so that is what structural analysis is doing here. And so Amos begins here with this quatrain here, and he begins here with Hoy hasha'ananim bitzion v'habotchim behar shomron. So looking back at what we just looked at, looking at the poetic nature of Hebrew poetry, we're going to look at this particular line that begins deals with semantic parallelism, and that it has an association of words, Zion and Mount Samaria, okay, as well as those that are at ease and those who trust, and so that's important. So the way that we would understand how the elements of Hebrew poetry are functioning here, remember, they're all done in rhythmical and in discrete units of linearized rhythmical thoughts. So the rhythmical thought here is Hoy hasha'ananim bitzion. It gives you enough information. Woe to those who are at ease in Zion. So that's line A. Then then what's line B going to be? And you're to reproduce Hoy here. Woe to those who trust in Mount Samaria. So we're looking at one here at just, affluence, of the first line. And then those who put their trust in Mount Samaria, this is more of, they have peace and prosperity in our days because of our military might. And so the stability of their lifestyle and its continuance into the future is guaranteed to them by the stability of the monarchy in Samaria. So these are the thoughts that that are generated here. Now, when we come down here to the second part of the quatrain, the principles of this are not so much semantic. Now, here it's going to be functioning here in terms of accentual. It's just we've got three prosodic words here followed by four here. So that's a 3-4 is a good combination of words. But they're just, remember here, it's furthering the thought. The idea. Now it's giving further description of these who are at ease and those who put their trust. Now these are designated the firsts of the nation. So these are designated as the leaders. So the leaders now are who are identified at in the first distich. So, because, this could apply to the whole populace, however he wanted to go. But he restricts the meaning here to the Nikuve, Reshit Goyim, designated the first of the nation. And then he further then tells us about these people. It's, to them, to them, the house of Israel comes. So every, this just gives you the whole, thought of where he's going here. He's talking about the leadership, and that the leadership provide direction for the rest of the people, who they get their advice from, and it shows you how it trickles down that that they're also then again going to be they're going to be putting their trust in Mount Samaria. And remember that we are to put our trust in the not the arm of flesh, but in God Himself. Okay, and then we talked about here just about the now we have the second strophe here, pass over to call, nay, and see. So this completely different thought. So it's going to then make up a different point. So we, for these, Amos's initial woes and characterizations, that are, this is in verses 1 to 3, and then the first thought was here in verse 1, the initial woes, characterizations here, and the additional description of the leadership, designated chiefs to whom the citizenry comes, and then we're here in point 2, which is here, in verse 2, Ivru kalne ura'u, pass over to kalne and see. All right, and so then this is all done here, and then we have the here we have then, the questions, the self-reflective rhetorical questions. Are you better than these kingdoms, or is their border greater than your border? And you can see this is probably chiastically constructed, because if you bring this down below here, this is starting off, are you better than these kingdoms? And then, the subject is reversed, or is their border greater than your border? So you can see that there's a chiastic construction here in 2b here. And then there's this accusatory, question. We've looked at this. So I just want you to see here that it's very important that you learn how to, begin to, when you go to interpret a text, like the moniker is, meaning is always context driven. So you have to determine the context, and then the meaning has, it functions within that context, and you need to see the different levels of structure. And that's what I'm doing here. So hopefully, you can reproduce this yourself on any text, anything, and we're just applying, this form of exegesis to the biblical text. Okay, so as we continue on with our text, we'll go into point B, and we'll see point B and C here. So we have 5 more woes, and these characterizations of the leadership's luxurious living and apathy to the national ruin. And this apathy part comes down here in this contrastive piece here, but they are not grieved over the fracture of Joseph. So as we begin here, Hashokavim al mitot Shane. Woe to those who lie upon, beds of ivory. Useruchim al arsotam. So this here, basically says, woe to those who lie down on beds of ivory, and those sprawled out upon their couches. So this is, this is just classic. This is classic poetry. Again, and it's synonymously related through semantic parallelism of one with verbal aspects of the participles here. Those laid out, and those here. In the form of a passive participle, those laid out, and then beds of ivory, and then here with couches or a divan. So So and it's it's a it's a 3/3 construction. It's a beautiful die stick, and then look at the next line. Ve'ochalim karim mitzon, ve'agalim mitok marbek, and so those who eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stalls. So, and again, this is a beautiful 3/3 construction. So this is to, you're to put in here, whoa, hoy. And so he's just going through these lists here, and he so here we end up, we had the 2 initial woes, and then he picks up with 5 more, so this makes 7. So these 7 woes here. And these are all, Poterim makes, we have this would be the 3rd, this would be the 4th, this would be the 5th, this would be the 6th, and then this one would be the 7th participle here, that form the woes would be attached to them, and so these are all talking about the luxurious living of the leadership. But when you come down here to it ends in a tri-stick. So this is I haven't been able to really line up my structural analysis according to the poetic analysis. That's going to take some time, but that's why I want to put both of them on the page together so that you can go back and forth between the two to reconstruct the full understanding of the text. And that's why I divided this this segment here, the top half with the poetic nature of the text, and then trying to isolate its rhythmical thoughts hierarchically in some type of structure, and that's represented here. Okay, but notice here that it ends in a tri-stick. Those who drink in bowls of wine, and they anoint themselves with the principal oils, but adversative, they are not grieved over the fracture of Joseph, the ruin of Joseph. So all of these woes here, all of these descriptions here, woe to those who lay down, sprawled out, eat, pluck, on the harp, and those who drink wine, but they are not grieved over the structure, the fracture of Joseph. That is this is the interpretive line that details for you why there is woe to them. Okay, it's fine to lay down on an ivory bed and be sprawled out on your couch and eat lambs. I mean, these are things everyone does, right? But if you're not grieved over the fracture of Joseph, that means this has nothing whatsoever to do. The leadership is leading the people in an evil way. And this is the whole message of the book of Amos. And then he comes down here and concluding announcement of judgment aimed at the leadership. And notice here, therefore, now, they shall go into captivity at the head. Laken ata yiglu berosh golim. Okay, so therefore, now they shall go into exile at the head of those who go into exile. So the leadership is there first to go. And then it says here, and then the Marzaic parties of those sprawled out shall pass away. So the Marzaic, there's been a huge thing here made out about this particular type of, I just put down, the eradication of their rave parties. It's the equivalent of what's going on today. And basically the party's over. You're going into, the leadership is going to be the first to go into captivity. activity. Okay, this is just to show you the, some of the archaeological finds that they have found concerning these ivory inlays. And you can see here the Egyptian, style of art that was, favored in, by the elite in Samaria. And this was found in Samaria. So this is not, they became very, very paganized. And it's important for you to see that, some of the artifacts that, we have to make the text come alive. Okay, so I'm thinking we're going to have to call it quits here for today. That was a lot of information to absorb. We're just signing off here. This is, another session of biblical theology, exegesis, and hermeneutics. Please like, share, and subscribe. And please, give some comments here to some of the information that was shared.